Velkommen til Oslo Freedom Forum. Welcome to the Oslo Freedom Forum. We know some of our dissidents are passionate rebels, but please follow these rules to help us run the conference smoothly. Please be seated and turn your phone on silent now. Be respectful of the speakers. They have worked very hard and have traveled long distances to be here. Please be present and be on time. Many of you have also traveled great distances to be here. Honor your own time. If you have a laptop or an iPad, please sit in the back of the theater so that you do not disturb those around you. Additionally, there is a lounge available just outside of the entrance to the main stage, where you can watch the program while working. If, for whatever reason, you have to leave the theater, please do not use the center aisle while leaving or returning to your seat. If you need any help, please ask a staff member. We are wearing white badges. Thank you, and enjoy the day's programming.
Ukraine stands on the brink of disaster.
Police opening fire.
I know that freedom of speech is not about revolutions, not about throwing out your corrupt and authoritarian presidents. Freedom is a daily exercise, the daily choice of which side you are taking. And if you are neutral in the situation of injustice, you have chosen the side of the oppressor.
This is not about statistics. When we talk about 100,000 of displaced people, not statistics. It's human beings. They deserve peace, they deserve dignity. And they only count on people like you.
Human rights activists and dissidents in different parts of the world, they may often feel alone. And HRF is able to bring them together so that they see that the struggle is often a shared one.
Profoundly, humanly, it's about connection.
I need a community of people that have been tortured, have been behind bars, that their home was taken away from them. So I can go to them and I can ask them, I can seek their advice.
We spend a lot of time discussing how we can practically make places safer, get people's stories out, fight the good fight.
Hack North Korea, organized by the Human Rights Foundation, brought 100 engineers, coders, activists, investors, and designers to get information into and possibly out of North Korea, airdropping a different kind of weapon. Knowledge.
You see people who live in free societies actually coming genuinely to see how they can help others also become free in their own societies. And that's an opportunity that I am extremely grateful HFF has given me.
Our brain rewards us for extending our hands towards those in need. Perhaps the answer to the epidemic of anxiety and despair of our age is actually to extend our compassion. The future of freedom is the future of creativity, the future of our tools, the future of social impact, the future of positively affecting 1 billion people.
HRF has become that support system we've been looking for a while.
We're all connected. You are really fighting for humanity. Once we understand that, it's never us and them. It's all of us.
HRF is this extraordinary universal knitting machine that knits us all together.
What we're trying to do is link people throughout the world to know that they can have and make a difference. It's only when we choose to do this and put ourselves from empathy into compassion that we will actually be able to move the powers that be to do something similar.
Good morning, Oslo, and welcome to day 2 of the 14th annual Oslo Freedom Forum. Yesterday, we heard from individuals who have been at the forefront of change in their communities and around the globe. At the Human Rights Foundation, we've been thinking about the duality of this year's theme, Champion of Change, internalizing the fact that beyond the activists who take this stage, we also have an opportunity and a moral calling to be change makers and to champion various causes. My journey in thinking about how I could be a change maker, how I could work to defend the defenders, began when as a child I witnessed the horrors of war in my mother's native country of what is present-day Croatia. Those wars in the former Yugoslavia saw a genocide before their end, and the lessons I took away from that impacted the course of my career. And at the same time as those wars, 8,000 kilometers south in Rwanda, another genocide left activist Carine Kanimba an orphan until she was rescued and adopted by Hotel Rwanda hero Paul Rusesabagina. She now campaigns for his release from the hands of a thuggish regime that has managed to whitewash its crimes. More than a decade after the Rwandan genocide, in the Horn of Africa, Filmon Debru became a victim of human trafficking, but escaped his captors after narrowly surviving. He ended up in Europe, where today he is a recognized refugee who brings attention to the global human trafficking crisis. And also in Europe, Dobrokhotov was forced into exile for his investigative work to uncover the lawlessness of Russia's regime, which continues to wage a senseless war against Ukraine. And this war has also caught the eye of China as it too evaluates how to further extend its long arm of authoritarianism. Chemi Lhamo was born a stateless refugee, and she has dedicated her life to preserving Tibet's identity, which the Chinese government has sought to destroy. And Jewher Ilham will not be silenced as she works to free her father, who was imprisoned by the Chinese regime in a concentration camp, along with millions of other Uyghurs. This trajectory I just laid out has taken place over a 30-year period. So through all this time, there hasn't been a moment for humankind not to champion a deserving cause, not to act for change. And until there is, our work as human rights defenders and defenders of the defenders will continue. Today, we have the honor of hearing how these brave individuals champion change, how they seek to disrupt the status quo, and what keeps them going in the face of adversity. And as you hear their calls to action, we invite you to think about how you will join and elevate their causes. Because this is the heart of the Oslo Freedom Forum and the work we do. Enjoy the program, and thank you for being part of this.
they're shooting them like dogs. Yeah.
8 o'clock, one freezing morning at the Nepalese border. At 5,700 meters altitude, it seems the time is always frozen. Dozens of Tibetans are walking in line silently through the mountains of snow, trying to reach India and see the Dalai Lama, their spiritual leader. The deep silence of the camp, where Romanian and foreign climbers gathered, is killed by a machine gun. Everybody can see a Chinese soldier standing in the shooting position. He opens fire. The bullets hit human flesh. Tibetans fall to the ground. One of them seems to escape the bullets but is hit by a second round.
This footage was taken in 2006 from where thousands of Tibetans once escaped on foot over the Himalayas into Nepal, then India. Now, because of high-tech surveillance methods, only a few make it through the increased Chinese patrols, even on the highest windswept passes. The international community, including government representatives, journalists, aid agencies, they can't enter Tibet, and Tibetans inside of Tibet are not able to leave. For a Tibetan in exile like me, I can't go back home, nor can I have contact with my family members back home. The Chinese government has, by design, locked Tibet down to a point that for the past few years, Tibet has been ranked the least free place for political and civil liberties by human rights watchdog Freedom House. Up until 2008, thousands of Tibetans were able to escape. But in 2019, only a record of 18 made it. The occupation, colonization, and the annexation of my homeland continues through various forms of violence, from the political oppression, to the social and economic discrimination, the religious and cultural suppression, environmental destruction. Millions of Tibetan nomads have been displaced and forced into isolated homes with little to no access for a viable livelihood. And 80% of Tibetan children, some even as young as 4 years old, are being stripped away from their parents and are being forced to attend colonial state-run boarding schools. There, they're being forced to learn, think, and even dream in Chinese instead of Tibetan. Such political indoctrination is truly a cradle-to-grave system, all to try and eliminate our Tibetan identity. The very Tibetan identity, while growing up, I couldn't make sense or grasp because of the pain and experiences of being displaced not once, not twice, but multiple times, and having transnational families. My grandparents fled from the Chinese regime in 1959, along with 80,000 other Tibetans that followed our spiritual leader, His Holiness the Dalai Lama, into exile. And for me, I was born in South India as a stateless refugee. And within our settlement camps, there was often a saying, whenever a young one dreamt big and said things like, someday I'm going to become a world leader, or a beacon of hope, community members actually reminded us that there was a big R on our forehead. That R stood for refugee. Despite living in privilege compared to our relatives back home, opportunities and resources were still limited. And I got a stark reminder of my identity in 2019 when I ran to become my university's student president. There was a petition signed by 11,000 signatures within days saying that I didn't deserve to run because of my Tibetan spirit. I received thousands of threats, most likely crafted by the Chinese embassy, of course, but there were death threats, rape threats. They'd constantly surveil me, take pictures, sometimes even follow me into the washrooms. But one thing that still to this day gets me choked up thinking about is reading personal messages that said, "Your mom is dead." I remember having to call my mother in the middle of the day, checking in on her, but telling her everything was fine on my end. Because even in exile, they have come to silence us. The Chinese government spends billions of dollars annually to try and control and infiltrate our communities, to try and intimidate us, to try to sell their narrative and their propaganda, and to silence our calls for freedom. However, that only adds to the constant reminders that I have of my responsibility and duty as not just as a Tibetan, but as a global citizen, to continue the work that we do, to continue to love, care, and strive for a world where every one of us is free.
How can Beijing be allowed to host the Olympics, given that they are committing genocide against the Uyghurs,
Later this year, we'll be facing charges of attempting to pollute, damage, and distort a historical monument in Greek court, a charge that can land us up to 5 years of imprisonment for simply holding a banner and asking one question. When in reality, the destruction of an historical monument actually happens inside of Tibet every day. After this protest, we spent 3 days and 2 nights in jail, but ultimately we got to return home. Unlike Yishi Chodun, who is a retired medical doctor and is still to this day detained for protesting the 2008 Olympics. Lhamo, who actually died in prison for sending money to her relatives abroad. And thousands of other prolific Tibetans, such as Goshrab Gyatsola, who are imprisoned for peacefully expressing their views. They didn't get to go home. Neither did Argentinian, who is the world's youngest political prisoner at the age of 6 and has not been seen for 27 years, our beloved Panchen Lama. Even those who don't live in prison walls, they live in an open-air prison. And Tibetans inside of Tibet have resorted to self-immolation, an act of burning oneself on fire, calling for 2 things. 1, the return of His Holiness the Dalai Lama, and 2, basic human rights. It's been 63 long years since my people have been home. I stand here today not just as a young Tibetan woman, Chemi Lhamo. I stand here today with the spirit of my ancestors. I stand here today with the spirit of the Tibetans inside of Tibet 63 years ago in 1959 that rose in numbers and swore to protect their land. I stand here today with the spirit of the Tibetans inside of Tibet who get imprisoned for simply holding this flag. So remember that big R on my forehead? They were right. There is an R on my forehead. But that R doesn't just stand for a refugee. It stands for resistance. It stands for resistance and resilience. Resistance, resilience, and responsibility. The responsibility that each and every one of you here today have to use the opportunities, the privileges to be able to succeed, to engage in meaningful dialogue, and to ensure that the voices inside of Tibet and of every other oppressed people is being amplified and heard by the entire world. Because, my friends, the work is still not done. And if we don't reclaim and remember our stories, who will? So let's pick up the phone that you have, go on Twitter. UN High Commissioner Michelle Bachelet is actually visiting China right now. But guess what? In her 4 years in office, she has not even uttered the word Tibet. So let's tweet her right now at M. Bachelet. Call on her to break her silence on Tibet. Ask about the colonial state-run boarding schools, and ask about the whereabouts of our pension lama. To the leaders that are present here, invest in your youth. Invest in the youth that are present here today. Invest in the youth in this world. Because look around. The champions of change are right beside you. We are here and we're ready. So together, let's rise.
Norway is home to numerous magnificent sculpture parks, including Ekebergparken, Kistefos, and even the most famous sculpture park in the world, Vigeland. But 8,500 kilometers away, in the heart of California's Death Valley, stands a sculpture park unlike any other. Founded in 2017 by celebrated Chinese artist Wei Ming-chen and financed by survivors of China's communist dictatorship, it contains numerous memorials to commemorate those brutally oppressed by the CCP. The park contains the world's largest monument to the 1989 Tiananmen massacre, a giant stainless steel 64, which marks the date June 4th, when the massacre took place. It's not the park's only memorial commemorating Tiananmen. So too does Tank Man, a life-size portrayal of the famous moment when an unidentified man, holding a briefcase, defiantly stared down a column of tanks. In June of 2021, Chen added the most provocative piece yet to the park. CCP virus depicted Chinese Communist Party chief Xi Jinping's head as a giant coronavirus molecule. The park's intention was to powerfully communicate the origin of the virus, its preventable spread, and the criminal negligence of the Chinese dictator. Within 1 month of the installation of CCP virus at Liberty Sculpture Park, unknown men arrived to the park under the cover of night, set fire to the fiberglass structure, and destroyed it. This outrageous crime was one of many acts of vandalism the park has endured since its founding, but never an attack so blatant that the smoke from the artwork could be seen for miles. After the destruction of CCP virus, Liberty Sculpture Park's founder invited the Human Rights Foundation to become formally involved, and after a visit to their park, HRF's Ardent Protest Program agreed to sponsor the creation of a new version of CCP virus, this time made of indestructible steel. HRF told the artist at the time that we had a firm belief that the vandalism had been ordered directly by China's dictatorship.
Targeting political dissidents here in the U.S.
Charging 5 people with stalking, harassing, and spying on Chinese dissidents living in America.
Just weeks after HRF's visit to the park, the Department of Justice of the United States government revealed the existence of a Chinese government spy ring involved in efforts to stalk, harass, and spy on Chinese-born dissidents living in America. The order from the CCP agents, in their words, was destroy all sculptures and things that are not good to our leaders. They installed a camera to spy on this artist. The agents also tried to bribe an IRS employee to obtain Chen's tax returns. Their ultimate objective? To totally get rid of him. Consider that if a single art sculpture in the middle of the California desert is so threatening to the dictatorship of China that they have to engage in espionage and arson, imagine the sheer power of art and what could be done if there were memorials to the crimes of the Chinese regime all over the world. The vision of the Human Rights Foundation's Art and Protest program and of Liberty Sculpture Park is to explore recreating such monuments in new locations throughout the world. We invite you to become involved with this effort. Reach us at artandprotest@hrf.org.
My name is Paul Rusesabagina. I am the house manager of the most luxurious hotel in the capital of Rwanda.
So, Carine, we're going to be talking about perceptions and narratives, I think, today. And as far as the West is concerned, I sometimes get the impression that the perception of Rwanda just hasn't changed for 30 years. But your father's perception has certainly changed, your perception has changed. For me, my perception has changed. So my first glimpse of Rwanda was in 1994 in July, when I was gathered with other journalists at the border between Zaire, as it was then called, and Rwanda, in Goma, and we were staring across to Rwanda where we knew that this horrific ethnic slaughter was taking place. And Rwanda just looked so calm, so beautiful. It's a beautiful country, hilly, green, the roads are smooth and wonderful. And Zaire, in contrast, was full of potholes and chaos and corruption. And it was such a contrast to see Rwanda in that pristine state and know what was going on. And I never met Paul Rusesabagina, your father. I only heard about him later. But when I was there at the border in July, he was already saving people in the Mille Collines Hotel in Kigali. He was the deputy manager who took over during that crisis, wasn't he?
Yes, my father is a hero. He is an incredible man. And actually, during the genocide, I was 1 year old. I was a baby, and my sister was 2 years old. And we became orphans during the genocide. Both my biological parents were killed because they were Tutsi. Paul Rusesabagina rescued me from a refugee camp, me and my sister. Then he adopted us and he raised us as his own daughters.
And it's an important detail that your father is a member of the Hutu majority in Rwanda. And of course, it was from that Hutu community that some of the extremist militias who were carrying out that ethnic slaughter were recruited. But I didn't actually know this until I met you in London, that you are a member of the Tutsi minority that was mainly targeted during that genocide.
That's correct. My father, in addition to adopted my sister and I, he saved 1,268 lives of Tutsis and Hutus inside the Hotel de Mille Collines. And this is different than the story that the Rwandan government and the dictator, Paul Kagame, the one single narrative that he wants the world to know. My father is a Hutu who stood up and did not join in the killings. And he wasn't the only one. There are many other Hutus, but the Rwandan government wants to make it look like just this one single narrative. And my father's story changes and gives a different perspective to what truly happened.
Because Paul Kagame, the president of Rwanda, has labeled your father as someone who's an extremist, a supporter of extremist Hutu ideology.
He saved 1,268 lives. He tries to pin the genocide perpetrator false accusations on him in order to silence him, as he usually does for any critic who is Hutu, who speaks up against Paul Kagame. He tries to make them out to be genocidaires.
So the Rwandan Patriotic Front, Paul Kagame's rebel movement, took over the country in July 1994. And as far as the outside world was concerned, this meant that the violence ended. My memory is, that time that journalists, diplomats, aid workers were incredibly impressed by the RPF and by Paul Kagame. There was a sense of massive relief. The whole country was full of dead bodies. It stank of rotting flesh, to put it bluntly. The schools, the stadiums, the churches were full of bodies. So at that stage, immediately after the genocide, your dad's relationship with the RPF was actually not that bad, I gather.
So actually, every Rwandan and many people around the world hope that whomever takes power after the Rwandan genocide would be a good leader. But we quickly learned that it wasn't the case. And in fact, Paul Kagame tried to assassinate my father immediately after the genocide because he didn't like that this man was being recognized as a hero.
Was the book that he published, the memoir, An Ordinary, I can't remember, it's called An Ordinary Man, yeah?
Yes.
Was that an issue, do you think?
Yes, actually, right, because he tried to assassinate my father after the genocide, we had to flee to flee Rwanda and move to Belgium. My father, in his autobiography, he wrote about the dictatorship today, and one of the sentences he says is that the dances have changed, but the music remains the same. And that is a problem for Paul Kagame.
And then we have the film coming out, Hotel Rwanda, with Don Cheadle, and that makes your dad internationally recognized. And that also seems to have maybe been a trigger point.
Yes. So my father used the platform that he acquired through the movie Hotel Rwanda to bring attention to the human rights abuses that the current government of Rwanda is perpetrating until today. And he tried to call for democracy, for the respect of human rights, for the respect of rule of law, for the respect of journalism. And so he used the platform that he gained through the movie to travel the world, go to conferences, schools, universities, churches, talking about it because the world seemed to be fooled by Kagame.
And so your father and you, the family, fled to Belgium and then eventually to Texas. And of course, he wasn't the only person who fled in the decades that followed the genocide. My book, Do Not Disturb, looks at a different group of people who fled after your dad, who were the members of the military regime who fell out with Kagame, started to regard him as a dictator, were worried about the personality cult around him, and they ended up in exile, and many of them have been targeted by the regime and assassinated. So you've got Patrick Karegeya, the former head of external intelligence, who was killed in 2014 in South Africa, former head of the armed forces, General Kayumba Nyamwasa, who survived an assassination attempt but has a bullet in his back. That was in South Africa. So there's this whole pattern of people fleeing abroad, denouncing the Rwandan dictatorship. And then there's also a pattern in which the government reaches out, the regime rather, reaches out and grabs them, hunts them down, grabs them. And there's this sort of message that comes out from Kagame, and he's actually said this on stage at times, which is, you can run, but you can't hide. So what happened to your dad then?
Yeah, so as you just explained, Rwanda practices transnational repression. And my father, as he was speaking around the world, was being followed, of course. The assassination attempts continued even after we fled Rwanda. They've broken into our home, they've tried to assassinate him, they've tried to intimidate him, they've tried to silence him, but he was never intimidated, and he continued to speak out because he knew that he had a responsibility to speak up for the people, that the platform that Hotel Rwanda gave him needed to be used to help the people who are being silenced and repressed by Paul Kagame. Unfortunately, he was kidnapped.
Well, this was an extraordinary operation. I remember reading about it. I was thinking, what? Because he was lured onto a plane. Firstly, he was sort of persuaded to fly to Dubai in the middle of the COVID lockdowns, right?
Yes, Kagame used an agent of his who presented himself as a priest, because they know that my father is a very religious man. So the man approached him and had been working to gain his trust for over 2 years, and eventually invited him to speak at churches, at his delegation to churches in Burundi. My father agreed, and he was lured from San Antonio, Texas, in the United States, to Dubai. In Dubai, he got on a plane. On the plane, he was drugged, and then instead of going to Burundi, the plane landed in Rwanda. Upon arriving in Rwanda, he was tied up by the legs, the hands, his eyes were covered, his mouth was covered, and he's almost 70 years old, and he's already weak and has survived cancer. He was dragged out of the plane, thrown into a truck, and taken to a torture house where he was tortured for 4 days, where after the 4 days, he forcefully signed false confessions because he was being tortured.
And he was tried last year on the basis of those confessions, and to nobody's surprise, because the family was expecting this, his lawyers were expecting this, he got a 25-year jail sentence. And I think that the US has just sort of given their view on that trial process.
Yes, my father was labeled a terrorist. As you know, dictators like to silence critics with false charges and made up accusations. And there was a trial, there was a transparent trial, live on YouTube. We followed. It was a show trial, and the United States government, just last week, announced that my father is wrongfully detained and has categorized Rwanda along with some of those other hostage-taking states, such as Russia, China, Iran, Syria, and Venezuela, and others. And so now, formally, for the United States government, Rwanda is a hostage-taking state.
And what's it been like? Because you and your sister, who is also here today, and your brother, your entire family have spent the last year and a half campaigning for his release. What's that been like personally?
Yes, so we have been doing everything possible, using every breath that we have to try to save my father's life. And we know that as my father was never silenced, he knew that it was important to call attention to those abuses. We have been doing just that, trying to speak about it to the media, to organizations, to whoever will listen to help us save our father. And I now too have become a target of this regime. They have been following me physically, they're trying to intimidate me, they're trying to silence me so I don't advocate for my father. And one of the Rwandan government officials just tweeted that I deserve a golden machete.
A golden machete?
Yes.
Right. Which is basically a pretty horrific reference because, of course, most of the dead maybe in 1994 were killed with machetes.
Both my biological parents were slaughtered to death with machetes, and making those references to me is inhumane.
It's pretty, yeah. And it's constant. I mean, I know myself from the day that my book came out, there is this very effective army of Rwandan trolls who I imagine are not real citizens at all. They're just being sort of doing their patriotic duty or being paid probably by military intelligence. And they really go for anyone who criticizes the government or anyone who retweets. I'm often struck by people retweeting my stuff, get sort of an onslaught from these Rwandan trolls.
Yes, and you can try it too, actually. If you tweet something about Kagame that isn't positive, you will all get attacked immediately. If you tweet something in support of my father, you will get an army of Rwandan trolls, probably all sitting in the same room, copying and pasting the same content to try to silence you and intimidate you into not speaking up against Kagame and not standing up for my father or other political prisoners in Rwanda. So they have a whole coordinated campaign to attack people and intimidate people.
And you have, I understand that you speak to your dad 5 minutes once a week. How is he? What's his condition like?
Yes, we have this 5-minute call, and it's my father is not doing well. As you know, he was physically tortured. He's being psychologically tortured, and then as we sit here today, my father is being tortured. We just learned he's also being deprived of his medication. We just learned that now there's evidence that my father has suffered a stroke. He has partial facial paralysis and his lip is hanging. He has pain in his arm, pain in his jaw, pain in his neck, and I am frightened. I fear that every single day that we get this call that says that Paul Kagame has killed my father. And in fact, we're trying to get a doctor, an independent doctor, to go see him, but the Rwandan government refuses for an independent doctor to go and examine my father.
Right. Everyone here is listening to your story. You're wearing this amazing T-shirt. I know there's a T-shirt campaign. Tell us about it. What do you want people here to go away, and if they support your campaign, what do you want them to do?
Yeah, so I want the world to know who Kagame truly is. I want the world to stop supporting Kagame. I want you all to go back to your countries, to your government, to speak to your governments and tell them the truth about this dictatorship, that this is a dictatorship that silences innocent people, that kills poets, gospel singers, journalists, that jails whomever dares to speak out. And I want the world no longer to be fooled by this propaganda, this fake image that Rwanda is trying to put out there as a success story when in fact the country is repressed and need our voice. And one way to do so is to represent. My father is currently a political prisoner in Rwanda. And if you wear this T-shirt, this will allow you to talk about it, this will create a conversation about it. Wear the T-shirt, post it on your social media, talk about it, get everyone to realize, to understand what this dictatorship is like, and hopefully we can change things, and this hopefully will also save my father's life. So help us save my father's life.
It seems Hollywood has rallied behind the T-shirt, right?
Yes. Now the Hollywood celebrities, the cast from Hotel Rwanda have joined in to helping us advocate for my father. The cast from the Avengers are all wearing the T-shirts. Actually, I would say that the Avengers are coming to the rescue of one of their own. And then we also have NBA players. We have NBA coaches. Actually, one of those NBA players is in the room. We are asking everyone to also wear the T-shirt and to help us raise awareness, help us bring attention to this, and help us save my father's life. We must take a stand. We must not be afraid to stand up for justice and to stand up to dictatorships like Rwanda.
Thanks very much, Carine.
Thank you, Michela.
Thank you, Michela. Thank you, Carine. I'm here because we have to make an announcement, and the announcement is somewhat terrifying. Some of you may be aware that there is a company operating out of the state of Israel called NSO, and it focuses on creating software that is sold primarily to intelligence agencies, including dictatorships. They are the people that are responsible for the Pegasus virus. The Pegasus virus is software that all they need is your telephone number. With your telephone number, without you clicking a link, without you receiving anything, just with your telephone number, they can take absolute control of a cell phone. They know everything that you have access to. If your phone has Pegasus, they have access to. They know who you call, where you are. They can turn the phone on at any time. They know everything that's happening. And as part of the interactive exhibits and the booths downstairs, Citizen Lab, an organization that works out of Canada and has been a pioneer and on the front lines of protecting activists and securing privacy, they have a booth downstairs. We have offered this booth to members of our community, where you can go and in a matter of minutes, they can tell you if you have Pegasus on your phone. And without connecting your phone to anything, they can inform you just by looking through some things if you have Pegasus. And there are 2 people in the Oslo Freedom Forum community that in the past 24 hours have been diagnosed as having Pegasus. Now, Pegasus costs a dictatorship about $1 million per license. So it's $1 million cyber weapon. And sadly, her phone was found to have Pegasus yesterday. It's active right now. Do you have your phone?
Yes, and this is the second phone actually that's infected. Last year, Amnesty International conducted forensics analysis on my Belgian phone and discovered that I had the software. And just yesterday, we learned that my US phone also currently has the spyware, which means that Paul Kagame is listening to us right now. You want to talk to him?
Hi, Paul. The applause was not for you, Paul Kagame. The applause was for the fact that despite all of this, you have a sense of humor about this. Paul, we'd like to send you the love that your father never gave you. And we hope that you can find and come to some peace and stop the activities that you're doing. That said, we will be removing Pegasus from this phone.
Also, release my father.
One of the main risks of leaving my home country, Eritrea, is the danger. The danger of running out of food and water, getting lost in the wilderness, or being shot by your own army. Even if you manage to survive all of this and get to a neighboring country, you can still get snatched up and sold by other human beings. So if an Eritrean is willing to risk all of this to get out, you can imagine how horrific life must be within. I had to leave my home country in 2012, and just a few weeks later, I was dangling by my hands in the Sinai Peninsula of Egypt. So how did I end up being a victim of human trafficking? To go back a little, since its independence in 1991, Eritrea has been plagued by the same ruthless dictator, Isaias Afwerki. His regime controls every single aspect of life in Eritrea. There is no constitution, there is no rule of law, no elected representation or legal opposition, and of course no free press at all. The baseline is always, do as we say and want, or else. That or else part could mean indefinite imprisonment or immediate execution. I was born a refugee to parents who themselves were refugees in Sudan when they fled Eritrea during its war of independence. The only time in my life that I haven't been a refugee was when my parents decided to go back home to Eritrea when I was 11 years old. For a few years back then, I got to see Eritrea at its happiest. People seemed to be in a constant state of euphoria because we had finally gotten our independence after 30 long years of war for independence. People were debating government policies openly in the media. Independence Day celebrations seemed to go on for weeks. Even though I was young, I remember using my own pocket money to buy private newspapers just to read about heroic tales of freedom fighters. Basic human rights seemed to be a given at that time. But slowly, telltale signs of oppression started to pop up. Journalists and ministers from the same ruling party were rounded up and made to disappear just for calling out for democratic reforms. The only semi-explanation given by the government that they were traitors and that they were planning to sell out the country. No proof was given. Despite this, some people believe the government's narrative. But when the regime comes after you, you start to wake up. University students were hunted down like criminals and collectively punished for protesting an unfair government policy. Overnight, free press was gone. Our only university was shut down and replaced with government colleges that were basically military schools. And students that attend these colleges, and basically every single adult in Eritrea, are forced into lifelong military service. In name, they call it national service, but in reality, it's just modern-day slavery. Lifelong military conscription until your body simply stops functioning. And regardless of what you think about this or whatever opinion you have, you can never say it aloud, otherwise that or else threat of the regime comes to you. Even though I was assigned a military unit after college, I didn't go because I did not want to be a slave to anyone. If this had been an actual national service where you're building your nation, that would be an honor. But this was simply enriching a few individuals in power. I did not want to spend my life in a colonel's farm or building yet again another villa for a general or laboring away in the gold mines. I refused to be part of this. Unfortunately for me, there exists a government surveillance system called GIFA in Eritrea. GIFA is when military personnel and government agents search through towns and cities to catch people like me who refused to join, and some others who went missing from the so-called national service. Due to this, I had to hide with some friends, relatives in different areas most of the time. It was a constant state of fear for me. I had to look over my shoulders the entire time. There is almost no household in Eritrea that hasn't been affected by this fear. And the fear of what will happen to you potentially is even greater than the severity of your current situation, if you can imagine that. In 2012, I finally got the opportunity to escape this open-air prison. My group and I, we knew the risks. We knew that we can get kidnapped, but worst of all, we knew that we could get deported right back to Eritrea. After careful planning, it took us 3 days through the wild to reach the Shagarab refugee camp in Sudan. But this is where my experience as a victim of human trafficking began. I had the misfortune of being one of the first to be kidnapped by the Rashaida tribe and transported to south of Egypt. We knew we were being sold to the Bedouins because we could see our captors fighting over us. To them, we were not even beings, rather we were just living cash. After taking us to the Sinai Peninsula, they demanded $3,500. After this ransom was paid, they sold us again to another Bedouin who in turn demanded $30,000. I knew this amount of money was difficult, if not outright impossible for my family. And I could already see some other victims who had been in this camp for almost a year trying to pay this ransom, who were so malnourished that they couldn't even stand on their own. They had to just crawl on the sand with their elbows. After seeing this, I just hoped to die quickly so that it would be over with. But my family worked out a miracle. They managed to gather all this money from relatives, friends, acquaintances, somehow. Some of the story I still to this day I don't know. They came up with the $30,000. It took them 3 months. In the meantime, we were being tortured nonstop. Beatings day in, day out. Your left leg would be chained to your right leg, and your right leg would be chained to the left leg of the next person. Escape was not an option. They would force you to call your family, and while you're talking to them, they would pour molten plastic on your body so that your screams would encourage your family to pay faster. They would dangle you from the ceiling this way, and then the beatings would continue, and sometimes upside down, and again the beatings would continue. It's this technique that finally damaged both my hands. I could not feel them anymore. My hands looked like charcoal black, and the flesh was simply started to drip like molten plastic. I knew that my body was shutting down. After the ransom was paid, I was sent to another Badawi. Unlike the others before him, this guy was kind to us. He did not torture us. In fact, he helped us get safely to Israel, along with another group of Eritrean and Sudanese refugees. I spent the next 3 months in an Israeli hospital where I occasionally heard the word amputation because they almost didn't have any hope to save my hands. But after some experimental surgeries, they managed to patch up parts of my hands and managed to save my life. After being discharged from the hospital, I tried to contact organizations for help, and I was also doing interviews to raise awareness about this human trafficking cycle that was happening still. Almost no one was talking about it then. For me, that was surreal. How could thousands die like this right next door, and it not even be in a single minute of news time? To jump a little to the future, after long physiotherapy and integration in Germany, even though I'm a slower typist now, I got to continue my old job, software development. So this is my story. But it's also the story of countless other refugees, some with even more harrowing experiences than mine. There is a new wave of brutality in Eritrea. The cultural strength of our communities is being eroded to the point of being non-existent. The majority of people trying to leave Eritrea are children in their early teens because they don't even have a single reason to stay. Meanwhile, the dictatorial regime of Eritrea, the North Korea of Africa, is trying to warm its relations to the West by allowing Western corporations to work in Eritrean borders. But this does not mean that the regime has changed its ways. It only means that a poor soul like me, my brothers and sisters who are still living in Eritrea, will be forced into lifelong slavery wherever these corporations are active. So to any nation or corporations that already have a financial deal or even thinking about having a financial deal with this regime, don't. Stop supporting this regime by funding it, because none of these funds will ever reach the hands of civilians at all. I had a very good income when I was in Eritrea, but no life during which to spend it. And I would rather be a homeless beggar in Germany, my current residence, than be a multimillionaire in Eritrea where my life is never my own. Whether I live or die, whether I'm free or prison is not dependent on my actions, but rather on a whim of some individuals. We do not have a money problem. Refugees have a safety, justice, and freedom-related issues. So I hope, nay, I wish and pray that when countries try to implement policies that would make the lives of refugees, many of whom have been trafficked, harder than it already is, that you would shout out, no, not in my name. And perhaps those countries that start to see this refugee issue as a burden, remember the story, is what I would say. Remember that Filmon and others like him did not choose to be refugees. Filmon's body was sold and trafficked and almost left for dead. Filmon and others like him were fleeing for their lives. And with a little integration effort, the so-called refugee problem could end up being a blessing in disguise to all hosting nations. Help us end tyranny in Eritrea so that we don't have to choose between dictatorship and human trafficking. Thank you. Done.
Ending modern slavery is the bold mission that we hold for ourselves at the Freedom Fund. Now, when I use that term, modern slavery, it's very likely that every single person sitting in this auditorium has a different idea, a different picture, a different definition of what that might mean. So let's be very clear about what modern slavery means. Modern slavery is a term used to describe various means of extreme exploitation. Think about situations such as labor trafficking, sex trafficking, bonded labor, child labor, forced labor, state-mandated forced labor, and forced marriage. It can look like a little girl in Nepal working alongside her family in a brick kiln, a young man from Myanmar forced to work on a fishing boat in Thailand for seafood that makes its way into our grocery stores and onto our plates. A woman working tirelessly to make the clothing that we're wearing in an effort to pay off the impossible debt that she owes her exploiter. Girls sold into sex trafficking by their own families out of financial desperation. All of these situations are incredibly different, but what makes each individual a victim of modern slavery is that they've experienced force, fraud, or coercion for someone else's, meaning an individual, a corporation, a criminal network, or political regime's personal or commercial gain. So what's the scale? How many people is this really impacting? Who is this impacting? As of 2016, which is now 6 years ago, a pandemic ago, several conflicts ago, it was estimated that over 40 million individuals are living in situations of modern slavery. For a little bit of size perspective, that's more than the population of the state of California in the United States. Modern slavery is a global issue. It happens in every single country, and over 70% of victims are women and girls. Who else? Who else is this impacting? Who's at risk? The truth is, anyone sitting here could be a victim of modern slavery. However, those who are most at risk are individuals and communities who live with underlying vulnerabilities. Think about those individuals and communities living in extreme poverty, those who are cast aside, who are marginalized because of their gender, because of their race, their caste, their class, their religion, their sexuality. Communities who have experienced crises such as natural disaster, effects of climate change, war, and political regime shifts. As someone who's lived through modern slavery myself, I know from my own experience that these vulnerabilities not only create the entryway for exploitation to exist, but they make it nearly impossible to ever fully exit. What also makes it so impossible to exit situations of exploitation is the fact that modern slavery is deeply embedded within our systems, our economic systems, our political systems, our social systems. Slavery is lucrative, not just for individuals, but for criminal networks, for corporations, for political regimes. Our global economy depends on complex, extended supply chains spanning continents in order to source for cheaper labor, for cheaper goods, which creates the perfect environment for modern slavery to flourish. So how do we solve for this? How do we solve for something that is so embedded within our society, within our systems? I don't have the time to talk to you about the Freedom Fund's solution, but I do have the time to tell you that we're hosting a panel later today to talk about the intersection of authoritarian regimes and modern slavery around 4:10, and we hope that you can join us. Thank you very much.
그리움과 뜨거운 경모의 정을 담아 위대한 김일성 동지와 김정일 동지께 가장 숭고한 경의와 새해 인사를 삼가드립니다.
There's a new and unconventional effort
to get information into North Korea
by sneaking information into the country on USB drives.
Human rights activists are now collecting old USB sticks,
urging people to donate their old flash drives by popping them in these slots.
Pack it with information, whether it's Wikipedia,
movies, TV shows, ebooks,
in a bid, obviously, to undermine the regime's lies and propaganda, which it feeds to its own people every single day.
To open up their eyes to the fact that there is a world outside what they've been led to believe.
And if you think about it, that is very dangerous for Kim Jong-un, because if people get a sense that the image of America that he has carefully painted for them is false, he could have huge problems.
김정일 동지께 선수를 위한 투쟁에 고귀한 생을 바친
이 USB에 희망의 정보를 넣어가지고 북한에 들여보내서 북한 주민들이 자유의 힘을 가질 수 있다는 생각을 저는 가지고 있습니다.
북한 내에 진실을 알리는 것이 중요할 뿐 아니라 북한 밖의 소식을 알리는 것도 중요합니다.
Of course, watching this information helped me to realize there was some humanity out there.
When we can educate and enlighten North Korean population with outside information, so that if North Korean people can have the ability to compare the North Korea with the rest of the world, then I think we can make a change inside North Korea.
Often people think changing the world is something grand. You gotta do so many things. But it can just simply starting by giving away flash drive you have. Because someone right now in North Korea can see outside information and dream of the world.
Please join us. Let's unite for the freedom of North Koreans.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Yeonmi Park, and I'm a nursing defector and human rights activist. So I'm sure nobody sitting here today think that, nobody would take Kim Jong-un seriously. With that funny haircut, he's a joke to all of us. And I don't blame it because he's really funny too, for me as a North Korean. But when I was living in North Korea, he was just more than my dear leader. He was beyond that. He was my God. That I believed him like a Jesus Christ, whose body dies, but whose spirit lives with us forever. And he would even read my mind. So when I was living in that country, I was not even afraid I was even afraid to think. So today here in Oslo, we learn a lot about dictatorships in all around the countries, all around the world. And most of the dictatorships that we talk about is actually physical dictatorship. And there's another dictatorship that North Korean Kim regime created. That is something called the dictatorship of the mind. It's very easy to control people physically, right? Restrict their movement. But what North Korean regime came up with is, if we enslave people's minds, then they would not even know, because they're oppressed to the point they would not even know they're oppressed. And how do you fight for freedom if you don't know you're a slave? It's an impossible task. And I'm actually enviously sitting here in the States and seeing other dissidents from all around the world. And not because obviously there are problems they are facing in their country, but because at least in their countrymen, they know something is wrong with their country and the regime. In North Korea right now, growing up there, I had no idea that I was living in a hermit kingdom. And people in North Korea have no clue life can be like this. You can live with food and you can have this prosperity and human rights. So there's one turning point when I was living in that country. That was when I was actually watching movie Titanic. I mean, of course, it's so romantic to see this DiCaprio dying for his love. But I couldn't believe, as a young girl, life could be more than being a revolutionary. Life could be more than fighting for a socialist paradise. You could live for your humanity and freedom. So, when it comes to North Korea, it's a very different task because people in North Korea do not know they're oppressed. So with one flash drive and with one love story, perhaps we can end the 80 years of oppression that North Korean people are facing. So please join me today and help me raise this awareness. So thank you so much, everyone, and please come back here by 12:15 for the session 4. Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Please return to your seats. The program is about to begin.
Good afternoon. It's good to be back in Oslo after 3 years break. Of course, we have not stopped our work. We did it online, we had events in other places, but I think it's important, it's symbolic that the Oslo Freedom Forum returns to Oslo. And as before, we are here from this stage presenting to you and to the world stories of courage and sacrifice, first-hand stories from those who have been involved in the fight for freedom in every quarter of this world. But there is something different this year, isn't there? After 2 decades of creeping growth, the authoritarians have finally overstepped. Putin's invasion of Ukraine have finally appeared so, awoken the free world to the threat all tyrants pose. Too often we're all consumed, we focus on our own struggle, alone. But in reality, we are part of the same struggle, the same fight for freedom. And today, Ukraine finds herself on the front line of this eternal battle between freedom and tyranny. Heroically resisting Russian aggression, Ukrainians fought and died in the suburbs of Kiev, along the beaches of Mariupol, in the bombed-out buildings of Kharkiv. And by refusing to surrender in the face of the what seemed to be overwhelming odds, Ukrainians sent a message to all of us and managed to bring us all together. And along with the dissidents from all over the world, are reminding a complacent free world what it means to fight for freedom. This fight has a cost, and often it's a terrible cost. And it's definitely a moment, the right moment, to reinvigorate the spirit of the free world and to reverse years of democratic decline. The Ukrainian war and the heroism and from one side and atrocities from the other side, it's a message to the people living in the free world to renew their faith in their own ability to fight back the forces of darkness. I often hear from our friends in Europe and America about generous support to Ukraine. They pat themselves on the back saying, yes, we are helping, and that's great. It's great that we are actually seeing that's what unity can do for us. But let's not forget that the price for defending freedom for those living in the West, it's money, a lot of money, but still money. Ukrainians pay in blood. And so it is with a significant sense of humility, I'd like to introduce our next guest speaker, Ukrainian Foreign Minister, Dmytro Kuleba. And I want to say to President Zelensky, to Minister Kuleba, to all people of Ukraine, that we owe you debt that can be paid only through unity. Unity across geographies. Unity across ideologies, across races and ethnicities. Unity in the defense of freedom against tyranny. Unity that your bravery, heroism, and sacrifice have made possible. Thank you. Slava Ukraini! Glory to Ukraine!
Dear ladies and gentlemen, I thank the organizers of the Oslo Freedom Forum and Mr. Kasparov for inviting me to address you today. Today marks exactly 3 months since Russia planned to destroy us in 3 days. All according to plan, as Russian officials often say, and we keep pushing Russian invaders out of our land. A lot has been said about Ukraine's remarkable fight against Russian aggression. All of you follow the news. The Ukrainian miracle of being able to withstand such a brutal force has a number of ingredients. Capable and highly motivated military leadership and courage of President Zelensky. Advanced weapons and stiff sanctions by our partners are some of them. But today, I would like to focus on one secret ingredient of our resolve, which is key to all others. This is the incredible power of Ukrainian society with its highly developed horizontal ties, advanced social cohesion, solidarity, ability to quickly self-organize, and its ability to unite in the face of fear. President Zelensky once famously said that freedom is the absence of fear. Ukraine is one of the nations which knows this all too well. Our freedom has not been granted to us. We have won it in a lengthy, bloody, and difficult fight. We have defended our rights in 3 revolutions over the past 3 decades and 2 wars, of which the current one is the most brutal, bloody, and devastating not only for us, but for the entire world since Second World War. It is therefore no surprise to us in Ukraine that the incredibly strong civil society has been one of the key factors of Ukrainian resolve in the past 3 months. Ukrainians are a brave nation. Ukrainians are the people who played a crucial role in dissolving the Soviet Union in 1991. Ukrainians rejected attempts to steal their vote and their right to choose in 2004. Ukrainians refused to yield in 2013 when our country was forcibly dragged into Russia's sphere of influence. In 2014, Ukrainians refused to allow Russia to destroy us militarily. And now we have no other option than to defend our right to exist and ultimately prevail. Anyone trying to explain these processes through the lens of geopolitics will always get things wrong. By the way, this is the mistake that Putin has made, and the mistakes that even some Western governments and intellectuals made by underestimating Ukraine. These decades of a nation on the move and in the fight for its freedom are a result of what is inside Ukrainian men and women. Activists and lawyers, human rights defenders, journalists, medics and firefighters, teachers, soldiers, women activists, diplomats and politicians, workers and labor activists, farmers, civilian volunteers, and every Ukrainian person who simply wants to live a decent life. Have their dignity respected. Enjoy freedoms and opportunities of a free society. Being able to change a government and protest decisions they don't like. Are they asking that much? So in today's speech, I want to highlight the ordinary miracles made by extraordinary people. They are the ones who bear the main burden of war today and the ones who have created the Ukrainian miracle. It is obvious that the Ukrainian model of society is competitive to that of Russia. We rely on a decentralized, highly motivated and self-organized model with a strong social cohesion and solidarity. I want to assure you that Putin will never be able to defeat a nation like this. Past 3 months have proven my point. Ukrainians are united as never before in fighting a real people's war, where everyone contributes, from donations to volunteering, from saving civilians to evacuating animals from the war zone. No state in history of humankind has ever won a war against the people. Many of the consequences of Russia's actions not only affect the lives of Ukrainians, but also put millions of people around the world at risk of hunger and undermine their livelihoods through its impact on energy and financial security. Moscow's unprovoked and unjustified aggression is a war against us all and can be effectively defeated only through solidarity of the international community. We are confident that with international support, Ukraine will prevail. But no victory will be complete without accountability for massive violations of human rights and international humanitarian law carried out in the course of this aggression. International human rights mechanisms should be an important part of the process by establishing facts and preparing evidence for further trials. Among many instruments, we very much count on the effectiveness of the Commission on Inquiry established by the UN Human Rights Council. We expect it to become an important asset to ensure there is no impunity for perpetrators. Russian aggression is also accompanied by a massive flow of lies that aim to mislead the international community. Such disinformation, which accompanies serious violations of international law, is a threat to human rights and requires strong countermeasures. Last April, the Human Rights Council adopted a resolution on the role of states in countering disinformation's impact on human rights. It was put forward by Ukraine and became an important milestone in addressing the problem of disinformation from a rights-based perspective. We count on further effective cooperation with all stakeholders engaged in countering this challenge. To conclude with, I think that the Ukrainians understand very well the fight many of you are fighting around the world to defend your rights. We know how difficult this fight might get, but we also know that the price of losing it is even higher. Freedom is not free. May our fight encourage people around the globe to stand up for what they care for and what they are entitled by birth. Freedom, dignity, human rights, and equal opportunities. I also encourage you to learn from Ukrainian experience and establish more people-to-people contacts with Ukrainians. The fight for freedom is a constant struggle that requires global effort. I thank you for your attention.
since 1945 began before dawn.
Invasion of Ukraine.
Latest wave.
What is really happening
on
here?
that as details become available.
72% consider
Tactical
Russia
nuclear weapons
more
in
hostile
Europe.
of the millions who
There are
live
pros
here.
and cons for both sides. Devastating attack on the school
More
there.
people died collecting water from a water. We've heard a lot about the tensions in the Donbass region in
Welcome back, panelists here.
Unthinkable.
And it is a
A
catastrophe.
new reality.
How much of this is semantics?
Я хвилююся за тата, не хочу, щоб з ним щось сталося.
Раніше я любив приймати ванну. Тепер набираю ванну на випадок, якщо не буде води.
Уяви, що ти не можеш її вимкнути.
Очень страшно, если через какое-то время люди во всем мире привыкнут, что в Украине война.
Думали, що покидаємо Бучу на декілька днів, через 4 тижні наші сусіди сказали, що вона жива, і це була найрадісніша новина за останні місяці.
Exactly 3 months ago, Putin launched an all-out invasion of Ukraine. Every day, we bear witness to the senseless cruelty of Putin's war. The cruelty of civilian areas being bombarded, the cruelty of civilians being massacred on the streets, and the cruelty of the air raid sirens blaring throughout the night, every night. Since the beginning of the war, the Human Rights Foundation has been determined to lay bare the crimes of the Putin regime. We hosted PutinCon Live and brought together the world's top dissidents, activists, and historians to expose Putin's criminality and corruption. Our Voices from Inside project reveals the heroic resilience of the Ukrainian people. We hope that you visit the Voices experience and record your own message of solidarity for the people of Ukraine. HRF has even run billboards in Times Square to bring global attention to the war in Ukraine. But most importantly, HRF started the Ukraine Solidarity Fund, and as of today, we raised over $250,000 for humanitarian aid operations and Operation Sunflower.
So what do you do when a tyrant invades? You move into action. You protect the most basic human rights: access to food, medicine, shelter, information, love. Operation Sunflower has been delivering life-saving aid across Ukraine since the invasion began. As of today, we have delivered 500,000 meals to citizens across Ukraine where it's needed most. In places like Bucha, where citizens were murdered in cold blood in the streets, we delivered 5,000 bags of grain so they can continue to make bread. In Mariupol and Kharkiv, cities that have been leveled by bombings, we're continuing to bring in meals and medicine to make sure citizens have what they need to survive. Operation Sunflower is determined to continue our life-saving aid mission, and with your support, we will begin to reach out to new areas where aid is needed most. Please consider donating at the Ukraine Solidarity Fund and visit our Voices from Inside experience. Thank you.
So when I came to journalism in 2004, it all was completely different, especially investigative journalism. Journalist investigator at that time would usually be a man, usually a man in his 40s or 50s, because you need a lot of time to get a lot of sources. He would usually also have a drinking problem, because you need to win the trust of your source, you know. He would usually have relationship problem, because he travels too much, and also because he has drinking problem. But he travels too much because you need to be physically present in the place where you are investigating. And you need to physically meet with the sources. So all of that has changed. Nowadays, we're living in the world where journalist investigations are much more data-driven than source-based. We live in the world when everyone, and everyone among you also, leaves a digital trace. When you make a phone call, when you write an email, when you use your credit card, when you book a flight or an apartment or a hotel room, when you download a picture or someone makes a picture of you and put it in a social network, I don't know, when you build some house in a faraway village, it can be seen from a satellite. And we have access to all of this data. So when we speak about digital era, usually it is considered in the context of Big Brother, who is watching us and trying to control civil society. But also, all these digital instruments can be used by us and can empower journalists and activists to go after dictatorships and their intelligence agencies, etc. So I will give you some examples of instruments that we use in our everyday work. For example, databases. Authoritarian regimes love databases, especially in Russia. They gather all the information on everyone. And this is very convenient for journalist investigators, because Russia is also a corrupt state. That means that if you have $10, you have access to all this information. And all the security agents, they are also there in these databases. For example, when we investigated poisoning in Salisbury, this Skripal poisoning, we found that one of the agents had almost the similar passport number than another agent from our previous investigation, Shishmakov, who was organizing coup in Montenegro and failed. But it was almost the similar number. It was surprising. So we did an experiment. We changed the last digit of this passport number and looked up it in a passport database. And we found another spy. We repeated this trick, changed another time, and we found another spy. So we found dozens of spies just by using one serial of passport numbers. So what I want to explain is that Russian security agents, they are not like James Bond style. They are more like Johnny English style, or Mr. Pitkin, I don't know. So they always do clumsy mistakes, and we can use it. For example, another database, car registration database. So the spies, they don't like to put their real address to when they register their cars, which is very clever. So what they do is they put their working address there. Thank you, GRU, because we put the address of GRU headquarters in car registration database, and we get more than 1,000 names of GRU agents with their phones, with their passport data, with their emails, etc., etc. Another example. Travel database. We used it when we made an investigation on poisoning of Alexei Navalny and Vladimir Kara-Murza. I bet you know Vladimir Kara-Murza because he participated in this conference before. Now he is arrested, but he was also poisoned twice with Novichok. So we see in travel database that security agents are going, who are experts on chemical weapon, are going to the same cities at the same days when Vladimir Kara-Murza is traveling. The same then happened with Alexei Navalny, with Dmitry Bykov and other Russian prominent opinion leaders and activists who were poisoned by Novichok. So after our publication, even Vladimir Putin had to admit that, yeah, these people really followed Navalny because, like, this is data. You can't just reject it. So it's about databases, but also a very important instrument is analyzing metadata. Metadata is hidden information in all the digital documents, like photos, videos, or anything. For example, there is also cell phone metadata. These security agents who followed Navalny, they didn't use their real SIM cards. But one of them, Alexei Alexandrov, the same guy who put Novichok on Navalny's pants, he turned on his cell phone only for 1 second just to change his SIM card. And that was enough for us to see and to prove that he was in Tomsk the same day and the same time when Alexei Navalny was poisoned. So this is a very powerful instrument. Also, metadata can be used with emails, for example. The insider was the first to prove that that was GRU, like Russian military intelligence, who stood behind hacking of Emmanuel Macron, Hillary Clinton, Bundestag, and others. How we proved it? Through metadata. So when they leaked emails of Emmanuel Macron, we analyzed it, and we found in one of the documents in these emails, in metadata, Russian name, Georgy Petrovich Roshka, which is not very widespread name, but we didn't see anything about him in open source, just that he participated in some conference on programming and math. So here we combine our old school journalism and new school journalism methods together, and what we do, we approach to 300 of participants of this conference and ask all of them to send us a brochure where we can find a list of the people and their positions in their organizations. And 2 of these 300 participants really sent us the brochure, and what we see there in the list, Georgy Petrovich Roshka, military unit 26165. It is a military unit responsible for cyber operations. Another very important source is analyzing social networks, websites, everything that you can easily find on the internet. It's called open source. Open source was very important for us when we investigated invasion in Ukraine. So we were doing this since 2014. And we analyzed all of these photos and videos, and sometimes it becomes pretty tricky. For example, we found a picture of a guy that we suspected that he's a very important guy in bringing arms to Ukraine. But we didn't know who is he. We knew only his face. So we used very powerful instruments of image search in open source, and we found only one website where these guys was on the photo. So this photo was made by a person who just wanted to sell his TV. So he just made a photo of his TV set, and there was something like on air, some TV channel on. It was TV channel Zvezda from Russian Ministry of Defense. And this guy was making an interview there. So this was the only one, the picture of him not deleted in internet. So again, we're combining old school journalism with new instruments. What we do is that we go to a TV archive and watch all the videos that were on air on the date when the photo was published. So we see like hours and hours of these TV Zvezda programs, very boring, but we find this guy giving an interview, and it appeared to be very important FSB General Andrei Burlaka, Deputy Chief of our border control. Why I also like all these digital instruments, because you can work from any point in the world, from everywhere. I wanted to stay in Russia as long as possible, but last July at 6 a.m., FSB broke the door to my apartment, came in, took my computers, cell phones, and passports, which is important because they wanted to prevent me from leaving the country. And if FSB wants to prevent you from leaving the country, that means that you need to leave the country immediately, which I did. So, and what changed? Nothing. I'm working, and my team is working from Europe as effectively as we used to do previously. So, what I want to do is to encourage young journalists, activists, everybody to learn and study these new digital instruments to go after dictatorships in your countries. Thank you.
Woohoo! Woo. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to be here. Too excited, I even got a haircut. Like you can totally tell, right? Yeah, seriously, getting a haircut for hijabi is such a torture. Yeah, that's why I'm getting married. So that at least I can show it to someone. Little that I know, it takes years and years of intensive trainings for husband to recognize this stuff. Yes, I'm looking at you, husbands. My name is Sakdiyah Ma'ruf. I was born and raised in religious conservative community in Indonesia, where pandemic lockdowns is basically my father doing his jobs. Basically. Yeah, I mean, living in a pandemic is almost the same like living in a religious conservative household. Stay at home. When you need to go outside, cover up. Yeah. That's the rule. I mean, you've had it for 2 years, I've had it for 17 years. Yes, you are looking at black belt in staying at home. Yes. In my community, if I can share with you a little bit, in my community, unfortunately, girls are getting married at such a young age, 16, 18, like even today. And it's not like they don't have access to education. I mean, they're very pretty. Some of them are rich. I'm neither pretty nor rich, so my father sent me to school. You know, my dad said, "My child, you have to at least have brain as your last, although least preferable asset." You know? And that's good. That's good. I mean, that's okay. So whatever the reason, I mean, for as long as I get education, right? So I registered for college. I told my dad that I want to be a writer, not a comedian, of course. No. And then I got admitted studying English literature in one of the university in my country. My father was so proud. So proud. He immediately called our neighbor and said, "Hello, neighbor. Great news. My daughter's just accepted at medical school." I mean, like, what? I thought he'd be proud of me. And I thought, well, that's okay. I don't mind. Like anything for education. Like, I don't mind. What scares me is that one day, one of our neighbors will give us a call for medical emergency. I thought you have a daughter who is a doctor, you know? And then can you help us? And I will say, oh, absolutely. Absolutely, I can help you. After all, laughter is the best medicine. Right? And then, but regardless, and I'm happy. I'm happy that my parents, especially my father, supports my education. With so many conditions, I wish I have a lawyer to help me negotiate. Like, I can go to college, but I'm not supposed to go out after class. I'm not supposed to speak up. I'm not supposed to participate in like any students' organizations. Most importantly, I am not supposed to get to know anyone from the opposite sex. I thought, wow, Dad, I didn't know that you're such a great supporter of lesbianism. Yes. And then for the first time in college, though, and this is another experience, for the first time in college, back then, I noticed, and this is happening in several college campuses in Indonesia, I realized that for the very first time, there was a separation between men and women in like public forum seminars or lectures, right? And women are not supposed to sit at the front. Sometimes there are curtains, you know, between the women and the speaker. We are not supposed to see the speaker. We are not supposed to participate actively. We're not supposed to ask questions. I thought, what is this? The origin of podcasts? And I was shocked. I was shocked because I was born and raised in conservative community. And even in my community, there's no such thing as separation between men and women in public forums, seminars, or lectures. Women just don't go to public forums, seminars, or lectures. Like, they're not allowed to. And then I remember for the very first time, a man refused to speak to me just because I am a woman. Yeah, as if like a woman's body is such a sin and it has to be, I don't know, covered or like locked away somewhere. And I said, man, I am, at that time, man, I am your best bet for this information that you need. And he finally agreed to speak to me, looking down all the time. And I thought, dude, you're avoiding sin by staring at my breasts? What a strategy. Speaking about issues like this is not without risk. Yeah? I mean, you're all too familiar with like internet trolls and everything. One day a man said to me, I will be happy to see you being burned in hell. I thought, hold on. Be careful what you wish for. If you see me being burned in hell, there's only two alternatives. Either you are a devil guarding the hell, or you are in hell with me. Like, how about that? Let's just pray that no one is going to hell. Come on. And then, of course, this is all too familiar for women, for activists. You are such an embarrassment to Islam. I saw your video. I can see your bra under your dress. And I thought, you are such an embarrassment to Islam. How can you see a bra under these layers? What kind of technology or app that you use? Most importantly, what makes you take the time to do it? And like, wow. Oh, but you just said that you saw my video. Oh, thank you. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and comment. And I had the experience when I was on stage. I went down from stage. A woman pulled me aside and then dragged me into this room. It was just two of us. And then she began to like, are you really a Muslim? All of your comedies are anti-Islam. Comedians are all so blasphemous. Just layers and layers of hates and threats. I stood up. Oh yes, not going to let her get away. I stood up. I looked at her in the eye and I said, ma'am, please let me go. I have a baby waiting for me. Please let me go. I mean, if you don't believe that women can speak up, why you ask me all these questions? Go ask my husband. This is his number. Yeah? With fundamentalists, it's easy. Just play the husband card. Right? And I'm married, yeah? Speaking of husband, I'm married. I'm married with the man that I met in college. Sorry, Dad. And yeah, and it was a romantic story. We were separated for 12 years. Until, we see each other again at perfect time when I'm considered expired by my community. So yeah, we got married. He was 40 when we got married. I was 34. He is a feminist. I was desperate. Yeah. But hey, things are getting better by the day, yeah? Things, I hope that you agree. I mean, this is the time to celebrate hope. Things are getting better by the day. Women's movement emerging and rising everywhere across the world. Women have their hashtag #MeToo. Men have their hashtag I did not see it coming. You know, men really, you know, so not seeing it coming that they think that it's okay to just randomly attack feminists. Yeah, I was in the middle of violent mob attack, like a violent group hijacking the name of Islam, ransacking into an office where we organized a discussion with a feminist Muslim. And then I heard, I was an interpreter for her, for the speaker. And then I heard loud noises, screaming, people screaming, looked for her, tried to kill her. I acted fast. I covered her with my arms, with my body. As the danger came close, I hugged her even tighter, like even closer. And you know the first thing that I had in mind? God, I hope my deodorant works. Because like, can you imagine you're in the middle of violent mob attack, you are dying, and the last thing that you smell is someone's body odor? Not a good thing. So yeah. On the other side of the spectrum though, overtime. Okay, one more minute. On the other side of the spectrum, though, I also receive questions like, oh, you're a Muslim from Indonesia, life must be hard out there. Yeah, when you ask permission from your dad to kiss your boyfriend. Why would you do that? Just do things behind his back. You know, I did. I kissed my boyfriend via text message. And then I also asked, oh, aren't you hot in this? Aren't you hot in your hijab? And I thought, well, this comes with customized air conditioner. You want to invest? Like we have a big market in Indonesia. And the ultimate question, when a guy caught you without your hijab, do you have to marry him? Like seriously, I received the question. And I said, God, no, otherwise I would have to marry my plumber. Are you kidding me? Our body has always been battlegrounds. So this is to all of us women. We who are sick of violence, of domestic violence, of sexual violence, of war, who are sick of having to always remind people that women have the rights for safe space, for education, for jobs, for participations in public, for family planning, for contraceptive, for our tradition, our knowledge, our land, for choices that we have for our own body, for our choices. We are not losers. We are the daughters of mothers who are leaders, intellectuals, warriors. Chin up, smile, laugh with me. Joy is an act of resistance.
Hey, everybody. We're going to get to Jack and Fodé in 1 second, but I just wanted to come out and thank all of you for being here. It is only through the generosity of our sponsors that we can do this. I want to talk a little bit about one of our sponsors, but before that, I know that some of you have noticed a lot of financial freedom activists hanging out at this conference this year. It might be a new thing that you maybe haven't seen before. It's certainly something that we've been emphasizing a little bit more in the last few years. But there's a big reason for that, and that reason is that for most people in this world, they don't have financial freedom. For about 87% of the world's population, they live under either an authoritarian regime that doesn't give you property rights, that doesn't give you FDIC insurance, that does not make it easy for you to take out a line of credit or open a bank account, and that relentlessly persecutes its critics with the weapon of money by freezing your bank account if they don't like what you say. Or you live under a weak currency. Maybe you live in a place like Sri Lanka where the government essentially has run out of money and there's nothing that you can do. Maybe you live in a place like Venezuela or Nigeria or many other countries in the world that have relentless inflation and where it's very difficult for people to store their time and energy into something that they can use for the future, for their families. So, for the billion of us that are lucky, that live under the dollar or the euro or the Norwegian crown, we have a certain sense of financial privilege. We don't necessarily worry that the government's going to freeze our bank account. But for most of the audience here and for most of the people that we work with, money is actually a constant concern. It's a constant annoyance, and it's a constant area of risk, actually. There's many people here who have a lot of trouble moving money from here back to their home country. There's many people here who've been frozen out of the system. So there is a rising new family of technologies that's actually allowing them to connect to the outside world. And you'll see people here talking about how things like Bitcoin and stablecoins and other kinds of technologies are allowing people to escape, whether it be financial repression or, as you'll see in the next session, monetary colonialism. And we were able to have a bigger focus on this year thanks to the generosity of CT. So our friend Ola is going to tell you why his company made the decision to sponsor this track at the Oslo Freedom Forum this year.
Thank you, Alex. Yeah, so my name is Ola. I'm the chair of CT, which is a company that's owned by Aker. And since you've been in Oslo now for a couple of days, you've probably seen Aker all around because it's the Aker Harbor, it's the Aker Fortress, there's an Aker Hospital. So it's an old company that took its name from this area. It's 180 years old. It was transformed into an investment company some 25 years ago. And we're mostly in Norway known for investing in oil and gas, and more recently in renewables. So we have a company that is a large-scale investor in planet-positive investments. CT is one of the smaller companies in the group, but we're investing across the Bitcoin ecosystem and projects and companies in that ecosystem. We're very proud, privileged to be able to associate with the Human Rights Foundation and to be able to contribute so that there's the financial freedom track. Money is very central in all of our lives, but those of us who are fortunate enough don't have to think about it. Unfortunately, as Alex said, money is broken in most places of the world. And so if you think about it, sound money is a pillar, a foundation of freedom. And so we hope that Bitcoin as sound money can take us to that freedom. And so really, I know the activists, journalists, the heroes of this conference, there's a lot of Bitcoiners here who are experts in this and can talk to you more about it. And I hope you take a little bit of time out of your busy schedules to learn about how Bitcoin can be a force of good, and Bitcoin can help you guys be champions of change. So thank you.
Yeah, and think about it like another tool in your toolbox. We're making it possible for you to check your phone to make sure you don't have Pegasus. We're making it possible for you to figure out how to use VPNs, how to use encrypted messaging. We want you to be safe and protected. We also want you to know how to send money back to your country if your government doesn't want you to. We want you to be able to do it regardless of what they think. So get empowered, get educated. Thank you for coming out here, and let's hear it for Fodé and Jack. Thank you, Ola.
Thank you.
All right. Hello, Oslo. You comfortable? How you doing?
I'm feeling great.
Good.
Good morning, everybody.
Good. Good morning. Oslo, it's truly an honor to be here, privileged to be able to share this. I'm very excited for this conversation and share it with you all. So as the video alluded to, my name's Jack. I'm the founder of a company called Strike, and I'm accompanied by a dear friend of mine and inspiration to hopefully many more than exist this very second. And we're going to discuss that as Fodé is the founder of the Bitcoin Developers Academy and Africa's Bitcoin Conference. And so a lot of our discussion is to visit the concept of money and understand its importance in the fight for freedom and its ability to enable foundational human rights and human freedoms, and maybe the state of money that exists today, and alluding to some education and transparency as to where we are and why we are where we are, and how it maybe isn't doing much enabling. And I don't know, I know we discussed backstage and I'm familiar with your story, and a lot of the world isn't, and I think the best way to get started in that conversation is allow you to just explain what you've been through, your story, and your view of money in the world and Bitcoin's potential role in advancing that.
Absolutely. Well, first of all, thank you so much for having me here. Thank you, HRF and Alex Gladstein, for inviting me. I feel very privileged and even to sit next to you, and thank you for having me. So my name is Fodé. I'm from Senegal originally, and we have a problem with a colonial currency. So in West Africa right now, we have about 15 countries for whom basically France controls the currency itself. The money is made by France, it's printed in the south of France, and France actually controls the economic destiny of 15 of these countries. In '94, I left Senegal to go to college in America. And unfortunately, that very specific year, the CFA got devaluated by 50%. So what it means is that overnight, the money that my dad saved for me to go to college was divided by half. The Senegalese people didn't have nothing to say about it. They couldn't vote. It wasn't like the euro. When the euro happened here with the Eurozone in Europe, people actually were given a choice to either join the EU and actually have the euro as the currency or keep their own. It's funny actually because a couple of days ago when I got here, I was really surprised to see that Norway actually have the Norway crown. They don't have the euro itself, right? And I thought about it. I was like, how come actually Norway is not really part of the EU? How do they have their own currency? Because they are free and they have a choice to basically either join this currency or keep their own pretty much, right? So this morning, as I was sitting in the crowd and I heard about Carine's story from Rwanda, Filmon, I was so touched, Filmon from Touchman, from Eritrea. And I said to myself, how can we have like happier stories in Africa, right? Right now we have these very brutal and very rigid governments, basically. So I want to have like a happier story about Africa. But unfortunately, this money itself, right, is actually what's maintaining these dictators in West Africa itself, right? So ultimately, if you want to like really get people to freedom, we somehow, some way have to like really control this money and make sure that this money does not support these dictators that are in power today. And that's what I wanted to share with the public today.
Yeah, it's a really important message to try and understand is money's role in enabling or disabling very foundational rights and finding a monetary network and a monetary system that acts in the best interest of the people and that cannot be manipulated and controlled by a central point of failure, by someone that has whatever malicious intent or interest to act against those that don't deserve that. And I think there's a severe lack of education, especially in the more developed and privileged world, that our money works, more or less. And it's very important to not only understand that in majority of the world, not only does their money not, but the power of their money is used violently against them and is held in such concentrated control. And so I actually, listen, I'm not going to sit up here and be naive about the fact that Bitcoin's a very complicated topic and it's a wide array of differing opinions about Bitcoin. One of the mental models I want to deploy in this conversation, and I'm curious your thoughts, is thinking of Bitcoin as more of a tool and not a speculative asset. I think one of the more popular ways to think about Bitcoin is a digital version of gold, and I'm sure we've all heard about that. But what I want to try and instill and discuss very quickly is Bitcoin somehow, through very complicated engineering and just pure innovation, was able to create a monetary network and a monetary asset that carries properties that are very foundational to supporting human rights and disabling authoritarian regimes or dictators, right? And acting in the best interest of the people, and the people can rely on Bitcoin because it is uncensorable, unconfiscatable, it is truly distributed. And if you think of it is a digital rock that lives amongst the clouds, is how I like to think of it. That's why I like to put it in the slide. It doesn't live with under anyone other than the people in a distributed fashion. And using this tool, whether you think Bitcoin is going up or down, or you think to the left's opinion or the right's opinion, it's a very, very important concept to understand that the ability to escrow value digitally, move value at the speed of light for the first time in human history, on your own merit, on your own time, sovereignly, without needing the permission of anybody, especially in the majority of the world, is such a powerful concept. So I'm curious, given the story you just told and the experiences that you've lived through, I know a lot of people where I'm from want to see an ETF. And that's, I think, one of the more improper ways to think about it. What do you want to see? What does Bitcoin mean to you?
Well, for me, like you said, to me, the most important part about Bitcoin is the monetary network itself, right? If you look at the situation in West Africa right now, we said, okay, there are 15 countries for whom, basically, again, France controls their money itself, right? But how do we get away from that? The idea is like, in the future, are these governments going to make the digital money itself? Is it going to be France? Is it going to be startups, right? The idea is that if it's governments making this digital money, they're going to print as much as they want, ultimately, right?
Yep.
So for me, what I want to see is a monetary network that is not controlled by the governments, that is not controlled by the French, and I am able to send money here from Norway or from America, where I live right now, send money to my mom, and have her basically be able to get this money, cash it on the other side by using basically the Bitcoin network. And the way that it works is that, let's say any company right now that basically implements Bitcoin, I can just take my wallet that's made by a company in the US, send this money to my mom, and she can on the other side basically turn this money into mobile money and get the cash in Senegal itself, right? So the idea is that, again, the money is not broken in a developed world. In Norway, in America, money works. We have a way to really go to a bank really quick, open up a bank account, get a credit card, and get pretty much like all these banking services. Unfortunately, in Africa, banks are pretty much like luxury brands, because a bank will never open up a branch in the village itself, right? So how do we service these people? Personally, I believe that the future of banking is going to be most likely an Android device connected to the Bitcoin network itself, right? And we can send value from anywhere in the world, and anybody who basically joins this network participates in the network effect of this monetary system itself. That's what I want to see, personally.
100%. And so I'm going to transition to this slide. And just to try and put a little bit more words as to what Fodé was alluding to, here's the power of Bitcoin as a tool. Listen, again, speculative biases aside, take a look at this slide. You can use Bitcoin as an instrument to escrow value anywhere in the planet. It's unconfiscatable, it's uncensorable, it is truly accessible. If you think about similar to the internet's ability to escrow information, Bitcoin has the same properties and the same capabilities to escrow value. And so yes, can it be used as an inflation hedge? Absolutely, absolutely. Can you opt out and opt into a monetary policy? Absolutely. But it is actually also a superior payments network. It's a superior way to have native interoperability and connectivity to transmit value at the speed of light without the permission of anyone else. And so in this infographic, it's illustrating the ability for someone from the United States, presumably, to initiate a $100 transfer. So my company, for example, but many others, allow you to connect a bank account. You have no idea you're using Bitcoin. No idea. We use it because it's actually just a superior tool to escrow value anywhere in the world. Connect your Chase account, and you want to send $100 to Senegal. What the software is allowed to do, you take the $100, you convert it to Bitcoin behind the hood, you're able to escrow value at the speed of light, across an ocean, across a border, across different jurisdictions, across different regimes. And then that physical value Physical, digital, bearer instrument. How do you digitally move a piece of paper? How do you digitally move a rock? You can't. You can digitally move a physical instrument in Bitcoin and it will land anywhere in the world, and then an ability to convert it back into the preference of the receiver. And so in that way, this illustration works if Bitcoin is $10, if Bitcoin's $100,000. If no one values Bitcoin other than a penny, we're able to do this and aid towards the fight for freedom, which is why we're here in Oslo, right? And so I think, I don't know if you have any other context here, but it's a mental model that I think is tremendously, tremendously, tremendously important, is that Bitcoin is not only for those to hedge the Federal Reserve's CPI metric inflation that gets reported in the United States. It has an enormous, enormous potential to create interconnectivity and network effects globally and empower things that were previously just very simply not possible.
Exactly. And for me, what I want to actually add to that again is that these particular countries have a problem because there is not cross-border commerce in West Africa itself, right? If you look at Europe, the EU itself, right, it is so connected. They are doing business like between each other, sending goods from like one border to another itself. In Africa, actually in West Africa, it is not like that specifically, right? So for me, what I want to see is like, how do we connect these 15 countries that are there? And like, again, do we have like actually a startup build this technology? It would take too long. Africa right now cannot wait itself, right? So the idea is like we have a monetary network that works itself. How do we connect to it to pretty much solve the problems that we have today, and Bitcoin works today? And that's why for me, that's why actually it's interesting, and that's why we can leverage it to have like more cross-border payments and have nations develop together, as a matter of fact.
Together is the big point. The way that we talk about Bitcoin internally as a payments company is we think of it as the global payment standard for the world. Think of it this way. There's an open, accessible set of instructions that if you integrate these instructions, you are interconnected with the entire planet to settle value at the speed of light and at no cost. And no one can tell you otherwise, and no one can deplatform you from that. And if you want to use it, you have every right. If you don't have to. But if you need to, you can. And that is the tremendous property that Bitcoin enables. And there's also one more point I want to highlight that I think is very important. In a lot of the places that money doesn't work, that we're trying to describe. In a lot of the places that money is not, there aren't resources allocated for money to act in the best interest of the citizens that very need it. Bitcoin uniquely, it has this property of being open. And it being open, and I'm curious your thoughts on this as well, is very important because of the network effects. So if someone in Senegal, for example, integrates this payment standard, they also share in the work of the world that's integrating on that payment standard. They also get the benefits that Jack Dorsey and Square and Block also are building on this. And so a potentially under-resourced, deplatformed, lesser privileged part of the planet gets to share in the work and the innovation of the world. And that's why open networks win. I don't care what over-controlling powers and overreaching that you do, you cannot, like, freedom prevails, and that's why we're here. And Bitcoin has that very unique network effect, which I think the progress of a developing nation in their monetary innovation, if they use this open payment standard and get to share in the work of those all over the planet, it truly makes it unstoppable. This is not a project that's going to take 100 years or 50 years or 10 years. I mean, in the last 2 years, you and I have experienced tremendous change, right?
Yes, absolutely. I mean, even after that, I would go back to say again, like there's a president in Guinea by the name of Sékou Touré. And back in 1958, when they wanted freedom from the French, he gave a really powerful speech to General Charles de Gaulle in France. And what he said basically, if I can quote it properly, he said, we would rather have poverty in freedom rather than riches in slavery itself, right? The problem is that right now, this money is keeping these countries in West Africa basically slaves. That's really what it is, right? So how do we get a technology that France cannot colonize? And to me, that's why I'm excited about Bitcoin, and that's why Bitcoin matters to me. I mean, on my day-to-day, basically activism to help these countries connect with each other and get away from France. And I don't have nothing against French people. Si vous êtes français, je suis désolé, je n'ai rien contre les Français. But the idea, I don't have nothing against the French, but I do have a problem with the French entities that are controlling and putting basically these countries under bondage, under financial bondage, and that's what I have a problem with.
Yeah, and so I know we both share in this message, and one of the many reasons we're here is to try and promote it, is that Bitcoin makes the world better. It makes the world better. It's an opt-in system, and if you have a problem with it, don't use it, but don't discourage those that need it and find value in it from using it. And I seriously encourage this group to just be curious. If anything, think of Bitcoin as an education vehicle. Because of Bitcoin, I have a PhD in monetary curiosity. It's true. It's very true. Why does money work the way it does? Why do people have outsized control to deprive freedom from those that it's so uncorrelated and unrelated? It's ridiculous. So we think, yeah, we need to make this Bitcoin network that's such a powerful tool for many, many reasons, more accessible and more usable. Yeah.
Exactly. You know, when I read the white paper in 2011, I never thought about America. Actually, I never thought about the developing world. What I saw was a tool for Africa to use, actually, to help us get forward. When I was this morning, I was so heavy-hearted when I heard all the stories, man. You know, I said, why can't we just have better stories coming out of Africa, right? And the problem actually is that black people all over the world share the same plight. The problem is that we don't have access to financial resources, and especially in Africa itself, right? I'm not saying that actually Bitcoin is perfect, but it works today, and we got to use it today.
Yep, 100%. And so the last slide, as we'll close it out, the company I founded, one of our core theses is what's highlighted in pink. It's one of the things I stand for and dedicate my life to as a man, as an individual, and then also as a business. And so in an effort to make the Bitcoin network more accessible, more usable, more helpful, we've always had a dedication to allocating resources to make that so, not only in our corporate interests, but generally in the people's interest. And so we felt that it was the correct forum to make an announcement of our latest donation in coordination to HRF and donating to a project called BTC Pay Server, which, for very quick education, if you look at this slide, BTC Pay Server is on the receiving end. It allows anyone, it's open source software, it's free forever, it is contributed to and managed by a distributed community, and it enables anyone in the world to connect and use this monetary network in a self-sovereign way that cannot be censored, cannot be controlled, cannot be stopped, and for those that need it most. And so we're really proud to work with HRF and contribute to BTC Pay Server. I don't know if you have anything else to add, but
yeah, I want to say a good shout out to Ire. I think she's in the crowd, and she'll be on a session at 3:15 today. When they had a problem raising money for the against SARS violence in Nigeria, they cut off the bank accounts. And Ire is the one who set up the BTC Pay Server to receive Bitcoin donations in Nigeria. So I want to give her a big shout out. I can't see her, but she's an amazing engineer. She's an amazing engineer, and she basically helped put this tool together to fight the oppression in Africa itself, man. And it's amazing.
No, these are the efforts that matter, and think of Bitcoin as the world's global project to build interconnectivity for money. It truly is, and I believe personally, and hopefully this conversation alludes to this idea that it'll play a tremendous role in the fight for freedom.
That's
I believe that.
Absolutely.
So yeah, hopefully the takeaway is understand money's role in not only enabling freedom, but also potentially depriving those from freedom. And that Bitcoin, I encourage everyone to just take a peek and contrast it to what exists today. And it's a really fun mental exercise, if nothing else. So it's an honor, man. You're an inspiration. Thanks for sharing the stage. That's all we got, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah. Awesome, dude.
Yes, sir. Good, man. Thank you.
Salam alaikum. Hello, everyone. My name is Jewher Ilham. I am Uyghur. For those of you who are not very familiar with who the Uyghurs are a Turkic ethnic group. We speak the Uyghur language, which is a Turkic language that is unrelated to Mandarin Chinese. We look different from Han Chinese. We dress differently. We eat different kinds of food. We practice different kinds of culture. And most importantly, majority of the Uyghurs are practicing Muslims. The Uyghurs live in the Uyghur region, which is located to west of China. So you may think, oh, I've never met an Uyghur before. Oh, the Uyghur region sounds so far away. But here's one right in front of you. And I'm certain, right here in this room, there are a number of products have been touched by the hands of the Uyghurs who have worked in conditions that strongly indicate forced labor. Whether it's a camera or the outfits, for example, that white shirt over there or that black suit over there could have been made by Uyghur forced labor. That doesn't sound so good, right? But don't worry, I'm not here to make you feel bad for the outfits you're wearing. What I'm here to say is that we can all work together. We can work together to push companies to make changes. We can ask them to end their complicity in this crisis. For decades, the Chinese government has been implementing repressive policies in the Uyghur region. Due to several instances of violence and unrest, the Chinese government claims all Uyghurs as terrorists and extremists in order to justify their actions. The Chinese government claims that those actions are for countering terrorism and combating religious extremism. But no, there are other considerations underpinning Beijing's intention to seize control over the population and the region. First of all, the Chinese government has a large focus on the Uyghur region because of its geopolitical value. The Uyghur region is full of natural resources, which marks up to over 20% of China's energy reserves, turning the Uyghur region into a national powerhouse. And as you may have heard of, 84% of the cotton production of China is from the Uyghur region, and that is 22% of the global cotton production. 95% of the solar panel relies on one primary material, solar-graded polysilicon. And the Uyghur region produces over 45% of the world's solar-graded polysilicon. The Uyghur region is also home to some of the most important elements of the Belt and Road Initiative, China's flagship trade project, BRI, which went into effect in 2013, aims to link Beijing to over 100 countries via railroads, shipping lanes, and gas pipelines and other infrastructure projects. Because of these natural resources and the advantages of the geopolitical values, plus the ethnic and cultural differences of the Uyghur people, the Chinese government has been repressing the Uyghur people and locking up millions. The Chinese government has also been transporting Uyghurs to other parts of China, working in conditions that strongly indicate forced labor. These are systematic and state-sponsored forms of forced labor, which intersects with other types of egregious human rights abuses, which includes the destruction of century-old architectures, undermining Uyghur custom and culture, family separation, widespread arbitrary detention, political indoctrination and transformation, gender-based sexual harassment, and forced sterilization. The Chinese government has also instituted an entire police state which involves in huge surveillance operations in the Uyghur region. Every few blocks you will see checkpoints and police stations located throughout the whole region. You'll find Chinese police sitting at a desk requiring people to deposit their phones in order to download data or upload surveillance softwares. My cousin, Nuralia Yalqun, was stopped at one of those checkpoints in 2017. For refusing to turn in her cell phone, she was sentenced to 10 years. For this non-compliance and for having a photo of my father in her cell phone, she's now spending the most beautiful years of her youth in a Chinese prison. I'd like to share a little bit about my father. My father, Ilham Tohti, Though he was an economist by training, he was best known as an outspoken advocate for the Uyghur rights and for peaceful coexistence between the Han Chinese and the Uyghur people. He spent years sharing his academic findings, writing articles, talking to journalists in order to improve the situation of the Uyghurs. But now, he's serving a life sentence in a prison in China under separatism-related charges. My father had never campaigned for violence nor supported separatism, but his public advocacy had frequently angered the Chinese government. Because of his public advocacy, he was put under house arrest multiple times. And after he was officially arrested, he was shackled, beaten, denied food twice, each time for 10 days. Within a couple of months, he lost over 40 pounds. Today, I don't know where my father is. I don't know if he has been transferred to another prison, or to a camp, or to work in a factory. In fact, I don't even know if he is alive. As a Uyghur, not knowing whereabouts of our family members, not being able to communicate with them, having our rights taken away from us has become a norm. In this picture, it's businessmen, soccer players, singers, comedians, and intellectuals, including my father here on top corner left. None of these people need any so-called job trainings, yet they're either sent to a camp or to a prison. How did that happen? Here's a population data collection form used widely by the local authorities in the Uyghur region, which collects information such as how many times a person prays, whether they're passport holders, which are some of the countries they have visited, do they have family members overseas. Any of these data points can be used by local authorities as a reason to send someone to a camp for re-education. The organization that I work for, the Worker Rights Consortium, is part of the coalition to end forced labor in the Uyghur region. We call on companies to urgently end all their ties with the Uyghur forced labor. With the backing of over 400 organizations from over 44 countries, including Human Rights Foundation, from Uyghur groups to trade unions to investor groups, we're asking companies to urgently end their complicity in this crisis. At this juncture, no ethical corporation from any sector should be sourcing anything from the Uyghur region. And it is critical that companies behave responsibly and apply same unified standard in all their markets with the passage of the Uyghur Forced Labor Prevention Act in the US, and in order to avoid Europe from becoming a dumping ground for forced labor-tainted goods. And I'm well aware that most people wouldn't want to purchase products that they knew that had been made or tainted by Uyghur forced labor. I do have that faith in humanity. I hope one day to see a world where Uyghur daughters and sons can call their families freely, can return home without fearing for their lives, can practice their religion freely, can speak their language freely, and I hope that day comes soon. You can help make that happen. I often get asked by people, oh, how can I help? What can I do? I'd like to share that despite our differences, we all, especially people here in this room, we all have two common things. First, we're all human beings. Second, no matter we're rich or poor, it doesn't matter if your monthly expenses is $100 a month or like the Bitcoin folks who are sitting over there, $1 million a month. We're all consumers, and consumers hold powers, and we can influence businesses and governments. So go educate yourself on this issue and share about what you've learned. Write to your local government officials, doesn't matter which country you're from. Call the companies that you shop from the most, whether it's Walmart or Hugo Boss or Zara or Uniqlo. Call them, write to them, and ask them, are they really prioritizing profits over human lives? For those who are still not believing the existence of those camps, please read the newest news report that just came out a few hours ago from BBC. exposing thousands of photos and documents leaked from inside the camp and police stations. And it's just one county, those information. Today, what we need is action. Together, we may actually have what it takes to free my family and friends who are locked up, who are trapped in this endless life of captivity. Thank you. Rahmet.
On June 8th, Yeezy and Gap took over NYC with nothing more than a picture of a blue jacket and a QR code. It sold out in hours. A few days later, the Human Rights Foundation used the hype to raise awareness of the fashion industry's use of Uyghur forced labor in Xinjiang. In the style of the original ad, we put up posters of blue jumpsuits, the same kind worn by Uyghurs in captivity. Yeezy fans took the bait, and even users on a Kanye West subreddit started sharing them around. But when they scanned the code to go to the Gap's online store, they were instead confronted with the problem. The result? Awareness of the issue increased dramatically, and we turned hype into hope for fashion's biggest victims.
Since 2017, the Human Rights Foundation has encouraged dialogue about human rights in the fashion industry through our Wear Your Values program. So when we first learned about Uyghur forced labor, we knew we had to help put an end to it. And public education is the first step. According to the Coalition to End Forced Labor in the Uyghur region, virtually the entire apparel industry is tainted. And as Jewher mentioned earlier in her speech, some of the world's most famous brands are complicit. In order to help the public better understand this uncomfortable truth, HRF has spearheaded a number of innovative campaigns. For example, last summer, HRF distributed posters across New York City mimicking a viral fashion campaign to highlight the industry's complicity. The posters captured the attention of thousands and have been recognized by countless awards. We also launched our Uyghur Forced Labor Checker, which is a Google Chrome plugin extension. Based on the Coalition's research and advocacy, the plugin generates a pop-up to inform shoppers whether or not the brand they are shopping at has publicly committed to the Coalition's call to action. Within the first 3 months of the plugin's launch, the number of downloads increased by a stunning 455%. And just last month, our plugin won not just one, but 2 Webby Awards, recognized internationally as the internet's highest honor. And today, I'm so excited to announce the international expansion of our plugin. Now, shoppers not only in the United States, but also in Australia, Canada, France, Germany, the United Kingdom, and Norway too, can download our plugin today and become champions of change with us. Together, we can help end Uyghur forced labor, because it's not enough to just live by our values. We must wear them too. Thank you.
Thank you, Jenny. Awesome. So glad to have everybody here. I'm excited. I'm Gustav Deutsch. I'm the director of production here. So I hope you've been enjoying the expo spaces throughout the hall here. I want to quickly say for lunch, you have, of course, again, the option upstairs here for all access purple badge people. And then I'm actually really excited. We've got a quick video I'm going to show you. I really want to make sure everybody gets a chance to go see the Art and Protest Lounge. And to get to that, you're going to go down the stairs out the front entrance, and then there's actually another set of stairs in the plaza. and then around, and then you'll actually, it's really, really cool. I'm going to show a video, and it's just such a great space, and I want to make sure everybody gets a chance to see it. Thank you.